Hey everyone, I'm Kate Kennedy and I'm here with day 20 of 100 Days of Kane, PA. And it's Wednesday night, so I'm here at the depot and we're inside tonight because we're gonna take you into the McCleary Discovery Center, which is where the history of the Lobo, wolves, and Kane is housed. I asked for what you guys were wanting to learn about and hear stories about, and many of you did say that you wanted to hear more stories about the Lobo wolves. So Dick Bly is here tonight to kind of walk us through the beginnings to where the wolves are now. So I'm going to go ahead and flip you around and we're going to go on into the McCleary Discovery Center here at the depot. And here we have Mr. Dick Bly. Hello.
Hey Kate, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Good, yeah, welcome this evening.
Thank you, we're so excited to be here. I love our Wednesday nights here with you guys.
Oh yeah.
And people have asked to learn more stories about the Lobo wolves. So would you kind of just start us from the very beginning?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a fascinating story. It's probably a story that's just unheard of in America in terms of one man, one individual, actually saving an entire subspecies of animal, period. But it's just an incredible story. Dr. McCleary, I'll give you a little history behind. He was born in Milton, Pennsylvania, and he, as a child growing up, he had asked his father for a pet, and the pet that he wanted was a wolf. So he's always had a fascination about wolves, always liked wolves, and so it just fits in with what he accomplished in his life in that. But he graduated from Princeton University as an engineer first, and then he went on to the Jefferson Medical College down in Philadelphia, became a doctor. Early on in his career, he was out in Wyoming. He was out by Cheyenne, Wyoming, practicing out there, and then eventually moved here to Kane. I'm not exactly sure why he came to Kane, but I think it had to be because the Kane family, there may be some connection there. And I know we're still doing some research to try to determine that. But when he moved here and he began, at that time in the country, just to back up in that, in the late 1800s, the U.S. government, through the Biological Survey, which is now the Fish and Wildlife Commission, but the Biological Survey, because of all the ranchers out west and their cattle and sheep and horses and things like that, the wolves, because the bison, the buffalo were pretty well being eliminated off the Great Plains, and that's what the Lobo, the buffalo wolves, really fed off of. They thought it was a lot easier, the wolves, to walk into a ranch and just have a couple cows or sheep that evening. So the Biological Survey, from political pressure from ranchers out there, they began exterminating and had a program to exterminate the wolves off the Great Plains. So they hired hunters and trappers. They would try to poison them. They would shoot them. They would do any means of getting rid of the wolves and that. So McCleary, around 1920, aware of all this, he began a campaign on his own, contacting the Biological Survey first, and then they would put him in contact with some hunters and trappers, but he was wanting to purchase wolf pups and be able to bring that certain subspecies, and the subspecies of the buffalo wolf is Canis lupus nobilius. So he was looking for that particular subspecies from Montana, Wyoming, that kind of range out there, to be able to bring the pups back here and be able to protect them, be able to have them in a more of a captive environment, and be able to continue breeding so they didn't become extinct.
Wow, what a progressive thinking man he was. Oh,
it's unbelievable. I mean, as I've researched this for the last at least 3 or 4 years now, and there's nobody else in the literature out there. I mean, it truly, Dr. McCleary is truly the father of the American endangered species movement. No question in my mind at all. I mean, this is long before any other environmentalist, conservationist, animal protectors, captive shelters these days. I mean, he was way ahead of his time.
So this is in the 1920s, and he's starting to bring these very specific breed of wolf pups to Kane.
He did, yeah. I mean, he felt. I think his philosophy was that they've had a bad rap for all these years. Wolves. You go back in the literature. I mean, back into centuries ago, and so whether you're in Europe. The wolf has always had a bad rap out there. It was savage. It's in all the children's nursery rhymes, the big bad wolf. But McCleary didn't believe that. He believed if you gave him a square deal, if you respected them, that they would have respect for humans and they could live amongst one another. And so I think that's what he set out to really accomplish. So in 1921, he actually, in January that year, the first wolf, it was an adolescent. It was about 7 months old. It was in a zoo out in Wyoming, and he acquired that. And Jerry was the wolf's name. Came by rail, and actually ended up in the train station here at the depot in Kane. Cool. In fact, probably right where you're standing is probably where the crate holding Jerry came in. Now you can imagine. I mean, this is a 7-month-old wolf. It was from the southern territory of where the Great Plains wolves were. So the coloration, they're different than the northern wolves. The northern wolves are a little bit more white and grayish in tone, and the southern ones had a little bit more earth tones, some tans and browns associated with them. So when Jerry arrived in January, it would have its full coat, and being 7 months old, it was pretty good in size. The freight master up here contacted McCleary and said, I'm not sure what just arrived here, but I think you have a lion waiting for you.
Oh my goodness. Do you have a picture of Jerry?
We do, yeah. We can take a look over here. Okay. And so McCleary in 1921 started with Jerry, and it's up here on the back, just a copy of the photo that we have.
Wow.
But it was named the Old Leader. And that's a photograph that Nicholas would have taken for McCleary. And so some of the photos in here of Dr. McCleary and his wolves and that, these are all in his backyard. So Dr. McCleary lived just on the other side of Evergreen Park, about a block south of Evergreen Park. And he would come up here and he would picked up Jerry and took Jerry home and had some fencing in behind his house there. Wow. And then several months later, he ended up with 4 wolf pups that came here. And the 4 wolf pups that arrived were from the famous outlaw wolves of Montana called Snowdrift and Lady Snowdrift. And they were outlaw wolves. They actually had, just like Jesse James, they had posters of these outlaw wolves. And so Snowdrift and Lady Snowdrift had a high, dollar amount on their hides if they could be poisoned, trapped, or shot. And so for many, many years, the hunters, they couldn't get them. They just outsmart the hunters. And so anyways, he ended up with in April that year, 4 from that litter. And so that, over the course of 1921 to about 1930, he had around 25 to 30 wolf pups that he acquired.
Looks like those are some pups.
There's some pups there, yep.
There's a couple, and then this is McCleary right here.
That's Dr. McCleary there, and then other ones inside there showing him sort of feeding the pups. Are getting a little bit older in some of the photos.
He got right up there in there with them.
Well, he did. I mean, he just ate, and not that they, many people have always thought that the wolves were domesticated. They were like dogs. Well, they weren't. McCleary was roughed up a number of times, very serious. Ended up in the Summit Hospital next door here to the depot, and we have affidavits as part of this collection that we have, and we'll talk about the collection later on. But we have affidavits from the caretakers and other people who were helping McCleary, and even himself that had been.
Oh, here's the pups of Snowdrift.
There's the pups of Snowdrifts.
Those are the 4 pups that came here from the outlaws.
Yes.
So how many total wolves did he have at one time? Like, what's the most he had at one time out at his home?
Well, behind his house here, he probably have He probably had upwards of 40 some wolves behind the house.
And the one here in Evergreen?
The one in town, yeah, yep. So
imagine being his neighbor.
Well, and that's he was on the edge of the town there, so he had the forest behind him, and so it was a good setting for them. He wrote a book during those years, those first 8 years that he was living with wolves. He wrote a book called The Lone Killer. And we have a copy right down here in the lowercase, an original. They're impossible to find. Only so many were printed, and so we have a copy here. We have his original notes as well to the book, and some additional notes that he did not publish in the book.
Are these the notes here?
Some of the notes here, yeah.
Wow, how special.
So he had... it was from his observation, his experimentation with the wolves, his anecdotes, all of that he put into The Lone Killer. And it doesn't sound like the most interesting book you want to sit down and read, but at the same time, it was the nature of the wolves. They were lone in terms of how they would kill their prey in the wild. So the buffalo wolves, the Great Plain wolves, they hunted as male and female. So once they bonded in life, they were together as a couple forever.
Wow.
But that's where they hunted. So today, when you see like in Yellowstone Park, there are timber wolves out there that they brought in from Canada. You see them chasing an elk or a bison or something. It's a mob mentality. You have 12, 14 different wolves. They're attacking this elk. Well, the Great Plain wolves, they hunted differently. They were more strategic hunters. So it was the male and the female. And the female would sort of loaf, because they would call them loafer wolves as well. And the female would sort of loaf in front of the prey, sort of mesmerize the prey, while the male is coming up strategically to make the kill.
Wow.
So Lone Killer is what his book is about. But it's his observations. And again, there's nobody else in America, maybe even the world, that has observed wolves the way that he did.
And the specific species of wolf that he saved, really.
It's that subspecies, yeah. Yep.
So he had these wolves behind his house here past Evergreen Park, and I know eventually he moved them, right? How did that happen?
Yeah, starting in 1929, he bought roughly about 50 acres out Route 6 here, just 5 miles east of Kane. And he created his park out there. He did it for several reasons. One, I think, was more away from the community, so he wasn't in a residential neighborhood with some wolves. Probably a sense of security for some of the neighbors in that. But it also, I think, was security for the wolves because he had some trouble with some younger kids and some of his wolves that he writes about, and so out there was better control on the acres that he had.
So it sounds like he was out. He had the wolves for about 8 years in town. Then he moved it out on Route 6. And
yes.
Is that when it became more of a tourist attraction?
Well, it did, yeah. And I think that was the part of it too. Was he could accommodate more tourists out there and that. And in the Lone Killer book, I won't tell you the whole story, but he writes about moving some of the wolves out here to the Wolf Park.
Oh wow!
And so he took them out in his car.
Oh gosh! Well,
so
Kate, you gotta pick up a copy.
So Kate, if we have a live wolf sometime, we'll have you transport it somewhere
to get the first-hand experience.
That's right. Yeah, get the first-hand experience. But yeah, so in 1929, he moved out there and had not only tourists coming, but it was really also an educational center. So some of the leading authorities on wolf studies in the country and that came to Kane and met with McCleary. Stanley Young comes to mind. Stanley Young is an authority with wolves dating way back into the early 1900s. So in the 1940s, he came here and to observe what McCleary had accomplished and his wolves, and so both tourist and educational.
Yeah, can you show us some of the memorabilia from that time period?
Yeah. Yep, over here at the, and this is just, what we have at the Discovery Center is a fraction of this collection that we ended up with, and again, we'll talk about the collection a little bit here, but yeah, this just shows some of the wolves and some of the fencing. He changed the way he fenced them. Out here was much more secure. versus down at the house. Some of the fencing in Tynehurst Avenue down here appeared to be almost like chicken wire type fencing. And so he had doubled up and tripled up on some of the fencing out there, and built his stone arch, which is still there to the day. The picture over here,
right over here,
kind of
yeah.
tough to see, but he built a stone arch out there, and his ticket booth was behind the arch. That was the entrance into the park.
Right, and so if you drive down 6 going towards Smethport, it's on the left-hand side there. So.
And then we found some of these little medical bottles out there that were buried along the site, and so they're part of the collection here. And,
how neat.
but what's interesting is these journals here in the lower shelf. These are all handwritten journals starting in 1927. And going up to 1961. So he maintained these journals on a daily basis as to sales, what he was taking in on a daily basis. You know, so it was maybe $5, it was $50, it was something. And so we highlighted here some of the years now, like August 1937. For the whole month, he took in $1,818.55.
Wow.
Now, it doesn't sound like a lot. Today, it's not a lot of money. But back then, the admittance to his park was 25 cents for an adult and 15 for a child.
So that was a lot of people.
So if you do the math, it's 6,000 to 7,000 people were just there in August of 1937 alone.
Wow.
So
yeah. So what did they do when they came in? They just looked at them through the fence?
Looked at them. They would have photographed them.
Maybe had some education.
I'm sure Dr. McCleary talked to them about about them. And
is this what the fence was
well,
like?
this is one of the gates from the Wolf Park, so
Those are pretty sturdy looking.
yeah, they're pretty sturdy. A little rusted today, but this is the locking system on the fence. So you slip that down over, and that would keep the fence secure. They had several of those on the gates. And you can see our friends are waiting for you to come through the gate, Kate. So
Hi. And then we had some signage.
Yeah, the sign. It's a sign that we came across a number of years ago. It was we purchased it from around Bath, New York, so up by the Finger Lakes up there, and McCleary, probably in the late 40s, early 50s, was doing some advertising up in that area to attract people to come down to US Route 6 and see the only Lobo wolves in the world, and that's how he always promoted it. He always promoted us by being the only Lobo wolves in the world.
Well, he saved them.
He saved them, yeah. And Lobo, it's a Blackfoot Indian term meaning buffalo.
Oh,
so
that makes
that's
sense.
why he used the Lobo, and just
Yeah.
not the Spanish interpretation of us being wolf, but he used the Blackfoot Indian. So
you said though that in when he had his home in town, he had up to 40 wolves at a time. How many wolves were out at the place out on 6?
he probably had upwards of 60 wolves out there
At one time.
At one time.
Holy smokes!
Now, keep in mind that he was 52 years old when Jerry arrived.
The first one.
The first one.
Wow.
So
this is like a second career.
and I think it became that because he, eventually he had given up his medical practice really to take care of his friends. And
The wolves.
I mean he Dr. McCleary finally he passed away in 1962, and he was at the age of 94.
Oh my
so
goodness.
he was pretty frail towards the end, but a gentleman by the name of Jack Lynch had heard about the wolves, and Jack lived out in Wisconsin. He was an engineer. He was working for a manufacturing company out there. He had heard about McCleary's wolves, read it in a periodical in a magazine, and contacted McCleary. Came here in 1960 on Thanksgiving, and spent a couple days with McCleary at his house at the park out there. And less than a year later, he bought it, and the rest is history.
Tell the story about the night that Dr. McCleary died and the wolves' reaction.
Jack Lynch, he tells the story in many different magazines and newspapers and things like that. But he was Dr. McCleary was over at the Bradford Hospital, was in for some surgery, and Jack was listening on his transistor radio that sort of the evening news and that. And but prior to that, in the afternoon, the late afternoon, he said that the wolves started howling out there. They started howling not just for a couple minutes, but it was probably for 15, 20, 25 minutes. He'd never heard that before and really couldn't figure out why they were so disturbed and why they were so emotional, if you would. Later that evening, he's listening to his transistor radio, and around 7 o'clock, and he heard that Dr. McCleary had passed away at the Bradford Hospital.
That afternoon.
So, yeah, that afternoon.
The wolves knew.
I think the wolves knew.
I think they did too.
Yeah.
So can you tell us more about Jack?
Well, Jack, he a different character than Dr. McCleary. Jack, he was certainly a showman, and it really shows in the photographs and even people who have visited there when Jack was caring for the wolves and that. Talk about certain stories, and you can read about it as well in many of the periodicals. But Jack, at that time, the Kinzu Dam was being constructed.
This is the 60s.
This is the 60s, and so from the collection that we have, we learned that Jack was trying to make inroads with the Forest Service, attempting to relocate from Route 6 because he felt that all the tourism was going to be down by the dam. And so he was trying to locate the pack down there somewhere to add value to the dam and the tourists coming through, but there was it wasn't happening. Mm-hmm. And so he continued out here Route 6 up until 1972, and then he moved the pack out to the state of Washington.
Oh, okay. Do you have a picture of him?
So we have some photos over here of Jack, and out in he was out in Gardner, Washington, which is in the Olympic Peninsula, overlooking the bay there, and he called it Lobo Land, and we're not sure why he picked Washington, why he picked the Olympic Peninsula. We don't know what the connection was.
But this was like early 1970s.
1972, yeah.
Okay.
So, but he stayed there till 79, and then he bought property in Immigrant, Montana, because he came to the conclusion that a couple conclusions. One, that the climate wasn't right for the wolves. They didn't look healthy. Their coats weren't the way they were back here in Kane. They weren't breeding, reproducing properly. So it was all climate driven. It was too warm, too wet for them. So again, not sure what the reason why we chose to move out there to begin with, but he moved them to Immigrant, Montana, and that's on the southwest corner of Montana, just as you come out of Yellowstone Park in Wyoming there. And he was pretty high up in the mountains. He was probably up around 8,000 feet. So, but he moved there and decided he was going to get away from people. He didn't need the tourist business any longer, because years before that, in the mid-70s, he set up a foundation called the E.H. McCleary Buffalo Wolf Foundation. And he was very successful at getting stories out in People magazine and Sports Illustrated and Audubon, magazines like that. And so people read about McCleary, read about what Jack was doing, and because he had a foundation, they started making donations. So I think he came to the conclusion that he could raise more money and not have to deal with people and maybe the stupid questions they're asking about his wolves. And I think to some degree, I think Jack became part of the pack. I think he became more of a recluse at that time, and so he took his friends and he moved to Immigrant, Montana. Yeah. And so that from 1980 up until 2008, they were in Immigrant. Now Jack passed away in 2006. Okay. His wife Mary continued the pack there for a couple of years, but her son Ed Wheeler helped Mary move over to Bridger, Montana, where the wolves are today.
So the very same species of wolves that were saved by Dr. McCleary in 1921 are still around in Bridger, Montana today because of Dr. McCleary's rescue.
34 of them are still in the pack.
That's amazing.
They just, in fact, last year they had 4 pups, and
oh wow!
So there's 34 of them in the pack, and a variety of ages there, but yeah, And they 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, they did DNA testing on 8 of the wolves. They had UCLA, Berkeley, a couple of veterinarians came up and they assisted the caretaker out there, and they tested 8 wolves, and the results back from that testing was that they were 100% gray wolf.
That's amazing.
So the species is the gray wolf. So like a timber wolf is a subspecies of a gray. The Arctic white is a subspecies. The Great Plains of the buffalo wolves is a different subspecies as well. So at least they're all gray wolf. But now at this point, an organization called Wolf Haven International, they're out of the state of Washington. They've been in the business for the last 40 years as being a wolf sanctuary. They're the only accredited sanctuary in the country, in the U.S. They follow these global standards for accreditation. And so they acquired the McCleary wolves, and the one reason they acquired them was because they were 100%, they were DNA tested. So if they were any combination of coyote blood within the wolf line or Malamute or something like that, they would not have got involved.
So they're going to continue to be protected.
Well, we hope so. It's we've been working with them for the last year now, when they took over the colony out there, the pack, and we just got back, a couple of us from. They had a board retreat, 2.5-day board retreat out in Red Lodge, Montana, right next door to Bridger. So we were able to see the wolves again. We saw them in 2016. Now we're able to see them here again, and some of the board members had never been to the McCleary Ranch out there, and so it was a 2.5-day. We're going to be doing an update in the community here soon about this. Some of the Wolf Haven people are going to be back again to participate with us, and right now the main concentration is to be doing a genetic blood analysis test on the wolves to see scientifically how unique this colony, this pack is. There's a couple major universities out west that have genetic bloodline data from way back, and so we're going to be participating with them on this study,
That's awesome.
So it really is. It's exciting.
You guys are continuing the legacy that Dr. McCleary started of protecting and saving these wolves and making sure that they're in a safe spot. So awesome job. This is such a thorough center, and we didn't even touch on probably half of it, I think.
Well, as I said, when you come in the McCleary Discovery Center here, you see a good variety of our collection at original letters and photographs, magazine articles, things like that. But in storage, we could probably fill up most of the depot here with what we have.
So if people were curious and wanted to really dig into the details of this, they could just contact you?
Oh, they can. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Come down here on a Wednesday night or on the weekends, or just give a shout out to you.
Yeah. And go to we just revised our website, so historickane.com. You can go there. You can learn more about not only the Historic Society, but also about McCleary wolves, and they'd be in contact with us that way as well. So
awesome. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
Well, the only other thing is Nancy Avales. Nancy is part of our team. She lives down in the Harrisburg area, in the southeast part of Pennsylvania. And she had, as a young child, her parents brought her up here to see the wolves. And so she was a Penn State graduate there. But she did her master's thesis on Dr. McCleary and his wolves back in the late 90s. And she contacted us back then. We provided her with information that we had, photographs. We introduced her to certain people around town here that had knowledge of Dr. McCleary and Jack Lynch. And so she did her thesis on this, and she gave us a copy of the thesis. And I read the thesis, as many of the members here did, and it's great, But then in 2012, she decided to publish a book about the Wolfman of Kane, Pennsylvania. And it's a romantic novel, but it's historically accurate. So when I read that just really sparked my interest even more into the wolves. So it's a takeoff her thesis, but she just is so talented with how to write. And so in many ways, you know, Nancy has been really a strong contributor and a motivator, and maybe inspiration as well to what we're doing here.
That's awesome. And could people pick up a copy here at the depot?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And get a copy of that, and also you can get a copy of The Lone Killer.
There you
because
go.
we reproduced that in its entirety, but we also, when we went out there in 2016 to see the wolves, we included where they're at today based on that time period. We've included some additional photographs when we were out there so they can learn a little bit more of the history. But, you know, again, through our website, historickane.com, you'll be learning more and more about the wolves, and we'll keep people updated as to what's going on with this genetic testing that's going to be occurring, and also, you know, just the relationship that we've developed with Wolf Haven, and it's all very positive. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. You're a wealth of knowledge, and we appreciate your time with us tonight.
Well, thank you. Thanks for coming, Kate.
Thank you. All right, you guys, how fascinating. This was almost 100 years ago now, right? 1921 is when the first wolves were brought to Kane, and it's 2019 now. So for almost 100 years of this story being unfolded, and Kane is a huge part of that. And so if you guys haven't been down to the depot to see the McCleary Discovery Center, come down. There are so many pictures, so many pieces of history right here that tell even more of a story. It's a really special place, and it just shows again the type of people that live in Kane are really innovative and forward thinking and really doing things to make the world better. So, oh, Dick's pointing over here. I want to give you a shot of the wolf here.
Well, one last thing to tell you. I guess I could tell you stories all night. But this is Tanya, and the hide was marked. Tanya, the hide is about 45 years, maybe even older. And so this collection we ended up with through Ed Wheeler, the last caretaker, 3 years ago out there. They had no interest in the history, so they called us and said, we don't know if you would remember the Lobo wolves, and we said, well, yeah, we certainly do. And anyway, so he invited us out to the ranch. We went out, a small group of us. You didn't know what he had, how much he had, so we ended up with about 13, 14 totes of photographs, letters, original, we have letters, starting back in 1920 from Dr. McCleary. He would write to somebody, and then this letter would come back to McCleary. Here's the letter, here's the envelope. It's unbelievable, the history of this collection but there was 4 pelts. One up here is not marked. This is Storm Cloud laying down in the case here, and Rebel is up on top of the case there on the other side. But anyways, Dan Swanson, who lives down in Ludlow, and he's a local taxidermist here, he came up and he looked at the skulls that we had and the hides, and he was quite excited about mounting one of the hides if he could do it. And again, typically taxidermy people don't work with 45-year-old hides. They work with something much fresher than that. So Dan and his group did the mounting up here, and it's just excellent work. So again, when you come to the center, you can see the skulls, and you can see Tanya.
Yeah, it's beautiful. For pointing that out.
Thanks.
So get down here, check this out for yourselves, and definitely comment. We have heard some great stories of history in the first 3 weeks, but would love to hear more about what you want to hear about. So please, in the comments below, let us know what you want to, what parts of Kane history you want to learn about in the upcoming Wednesdays here at the depot. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again tomorrow for day 21.